Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and RockerMike on the only podcast that I'll hear that won't make me wanna rip off my ears. Oh, the Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show. Oh, I want the Rock Show. The Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show. I want the Rock Show. Let's get lumped up.
Hello, people. Welcome to another exciting episode of The Rock Show. This is episode 153, and we are talking about Arthur Lee and Love. I think they were from Los Angeles, right? Or something?
Yeah. How you doing, Rob?
I'm pretty good.
Good.
Up.
Yeah.
I'm up after a night of getting lumped up real bad.
I was right there with you, man. I know. I'm hanging on by a thread here.
I saw the picture, like you, Vinny, and Dad, man.
Oh, that was forget it.
Dude, I think
No.
Dan put a picture up of Fat Dad. I never knew he was that big.
He used to be a big boy. Yeah.
I was like, holy crap.
I didn't know him then, but he talks about those days.
Hey, did you see George Figueroa and Karen? They look like they were going to invade Ukraine with those Russian hats.
Shout out to George Figueroa.
All right, man. Let's start the show, man. Oh, and
Yeah, so we're talking about Arthur Lee and Love, and Love is one of these bands that kind of like the Velvet Underground on the East Coast. On the West Coast, these guys were very influential. I definitely a little bit more successful at first than the Velvet Underground, but as far as being influential, they definitely were. Arthur Lee passed away in 2006. It was, big loss. He died a young guy of leukemia. But for many, many years, he would come around and do these songs. And I mean, they were very much, they were bigger in England than they were in the States. And they had a big influence on the punk scene in Europe, especially England. I know the Damned covered one of their songs, Alone Again, or off the Forever Changes album. Yeah. And that was the third album, and it's considered by many to be one of the greatest albums ever made. I think it has a special Grammy for it, and many years later it got one, and it's in the Library of Congress as like an album that's classic, and they recorded it. He had a hard life, Arthur Lee. There was a lot of excess, and guys in the band also, but they were all really good musicians. And Arthur Lee was kind of a child prodigy, so I'll get into it here. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee, March 7th, 1945. His mother's name was Agnes. She was a school teacher, and his father's name was Chester Taylor. Okay. Now, he was a local jazz musician and a cornet player, which is like a little trumpet. As an only child, Arthur was nicknamed Poe, short for Porter, which was his middle name.
Yeah.
As a child, Arthur was looked after often by family members, so his mother could continue teaching. Because of this, he got, he was by himself a lot, and he got very interested in music. His father was a musician at a young age. Basically, young child, he was starting to play music and stuff. He would often sing along with blues artists like Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters when he heard him on the radio. Very influenced by that. By the early 1950s, his parents divorced, And Arthur would say later that he actually only saw his dad like 3 times in his whole life. His dad was hardly ever around. So one day when his dad wasn't around, his mother and him picked up and moved to California. Okay, they took a train from Memphis out to California. By 1953, the divorce was settled. And in 1955, Agnes remarried a guy named Clinton Lee. And Clinton Lee he was a successful construction worker, brought a little stability to the family. Mom was able to go back and teach a little bit. And he officially adopted him, which is why the last name Lee.
I was going to ask you about that just now, because he took his stepfather's name, which is something that doesn't happen.
Yeah, especially if he like officially legally adopted Arthur, which a lot of stepfathers don't do, but you could do.
Yeah,
you know.
But Lee was interesting because he played multiple instruments, right? Like
he started out playing an accordion, I believe.
Yeah.
But what I want to mention is that after the mother got remarried, she did go back to work, and he was living. They were living in the South, what's called the West Adams area of South Central LA. Okay, tough area. I think it was a little bit nicer back then, but still a tough area. It turned out that he went to the same school as Johnny Eccles, who would end up being in love. Okay, and that's how they knew each other. Now, he attended the 6th Avenue Elementary School, and he was very good in athletics. Okay, of course, anything music related he was good at. It's just academically he was a little behind. All right, he's like that kind of kid. He was also known as one of the toughest kids on the block.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And his great aunt, actually pressured him a lot to get an education, but it really, it didn't go that well. Anything to do with sports and music, he would love. Okay, but when it came to regular stuff, he just didn't care. He loved animals a lot as well. His first musical instrument was the accordion. Okay, which is, you laugh, but it's actually a very difficult instrument. It's not easy to play. Okay, and first of all, you got to carry the thing, and it's not light. Okay, but if you ever watch those guys in the subway, sometimes it's like I'll look at them, I'm like, damn, how do you play that freaking thing? Because every time you squeeze it, it's a different note, and you got to know all the keys. Now he, at a young age, he would learn how to read music. Okay, which would help him a lot later.
That's amazing. He doesn't care about the other, but he can read music. I always find people like that I think reading music is fucking difficult.
It is. I mean, I've taken music theory courses, and it's not easy to understand. You got to really be into it. My son is taking Sebastian. He's taking music theory, and I just look at some of the stuff. I'm like, wow, okay. But one thing that Arthur could do very well is mimic what he heard. So this was kind of reminiscent of Sun Ra. We were talking in Sun Ra. Sun Ra could write music at a young age, and also he could hear something and go home and just do it. Okay, so Arthur was very.
He would write the musical notes of what he heard.
He would even do the note. Yeah, he was very talented. But Arthur could play what he heard.
Yeah,
okay, which is hard to do. By the time he graduated from Susan Miller Dorsey High School, he decided that he would have a musical career. That's what he wanted. So basically that came from, he was on the fence with it, but then one day at a school assembly, he saw his friend Johnny Eccles playing Johnny Be Good with a 5-piece band on stage, and he just said, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So his first known recording is actually from 1963, okay, when he was 18 years old. The song was called The Ninth Wave, and it was released by his first band, which was an instrumental group called the LAGs. And the band was influenced by Booker T and the MGs, like Stax Music, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it included his friend Johnny Eccles. They got together in this band who played guitar. Now, Arthur played organ. They had a guy named Alan Talbot on sax and a guy named Roland Davis on drums. Yeah. Now, as a songwriter, Lee wrote the surf songs "White Caps" and "Ski Surfing Sanctuary." The surfing craze was big in '63.
It almost sound like the Beach Boys there.
Everybody was trying to do that.
Yeah.
There were so many bands trying to do that. There's a song called "My Diary," and that's the first Lee song that almost became a hit. He wrote it actually in his teens, but R&B singer Rosalie Brooks recorded it for Revis Records, and it included actually Jimi Hendrix on guitar.
Wow.
Yeah. So not only is he writing songs, he's writing for other people as well. Lee wrote, He wrote a song called "I've Been Trying" for an artist named Little Ray, who was a Chicano soul singer at the time from East LA. The song "Lucy Baines" was a song that he wrote about President Lyndon Johnson's daughter, and it was performed by his new band, the American Four.
The American Four. Right.
Now, he also wrote a song called "Everybody Jerk" and "Slow Jerk." Okay, jerk was a dance at the time that people used to do. And that was for Ronnie and the Pomona Casuals. So again, he's writing for his stuff and other people. That version actually has Lee on vocals on that band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did some backing vocals, I think. These early recordings are very rare, very hard to find, but they were compiled on a 1997 bootleg CD. And the American Four tracks that are out there have been officially released. I believe Norton Records put them out many, many, many years later.
It's been re-released as a 45 and also available on Apple iTunes.
Apple iTunes, there you go. Yeah, I think it was on Norton Records, who's known for putting out a lot of obscure stuff. They're a great label. Lee had said that he felt vindicated when he first heard the Byrds, because he had been writing music like that, okay? He could write a surf song, but then he could also write a kind of folk rock kind of thing that the Byrds were doing. If you listen to the first Love album, the self-titled one, you pick up on that a little bit, okay? There's, it sounds almost like, the jangly guitar sound of the Byrds in some of the songs. So he was doing something at the same time. I mean, the Byrds were in the folk scene in '63, and then by '65 they were doing their thing. So it all happened around the same time. In '65 he had a folk rock band called the Grassroots, but they would change their name to Love, because there was already another band called the Grassroots that they found out about. So they call themselves Love. Now, Lee's early appearances were at a club in Hollywood. Many clubs in Hollywood. Brave New World was one, Hullabaloo, Beto Lido's. There was some live stuff released over the years from there. Right. Another club called the Sea Witch. Beto Lido's was actually like a little hole-in-the-wall club that was like on a dead-end street. All right. And it actually had a name called Cosmo's Alley. That's where the club was. Okay. And he started to get very popular there. People would come in and out. Rock stars were known to come in and out of that club when they were in town. People like Bob Dylan, Mick Jagger, Brian Jones would all go in. Jimi Hendrix sometimes would go in there. So, he was meeting a lot of people.
He was hanging out with our A-listers then.
Yeah. I mean, this was definitely a place that I think the industry would pay attention, but that wasn't what got them signed. They ended up getting a string of gigs at the Whiskey A Go-Go, which was a notch up from Beto Lido's. Okay, it was a lot bigger. And
that's a place we hear a lot of people mention, Whiskey A Go-Go.
Yeah, it's a big place in LA. I've seen it. I've never been inside it, but I've seen it.
Is it still around?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it hasn't gone anywhere. I mean, a lot of people would get their starts there. I mean, even the Doors played there, like,
Wow.
yeah. So it was at the Whiskey that Elektra Records got attracted to them, okay, and said, we need to. Jack Holzman loved Arthur Lee's style. He wanted to sign them. In fact, they were the first rock act that Elektra ever signed.
Wow.
Okay, Elektra at that time was a jazz label mostly. Okay, and they wanted to get into the rock world.
And roll. Yep.
Yeah, so they signed Love. They would sign the Doors, and eventually the MC5 and the Stooges, and they would put out some fantastic music. That label. The lineup at this time for Love was Arthur on keyboards and vocals. Johnny Eccles was on guitar. You had singer-guitarist Brian McLean. He sang most of the songs. Bass player Ken Forsey and Snoopy Fisterer on drums. Okay?
What a day.
Yeah, Snoopy Fisterer. With a P. P-F-I-S-T-E-R-R-E-R. Fisterer. The band at that time was all living together communally in a house called The Castle.
I like that.
Yeah. There's a clip on YouTube. You could see it of them playing on. I think it might be Where the Action Is with Dick Clark, or it might have been American Bandstand with Dick Clark, but it was Dick Clark. They come out, they do a song, and then I think it's My Little Red Book. And then he comes out and he asks them, like, so what's this place you live in called The Castle? He asks them about it. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's an empty house that they lived in. Basically what it was, they didn't even pay rent. What they did was they just paid the taxes on the house. They had an agreement. And they paid the taxes on it, and they just kept it, they maintained it. And it was a huge, huge castle-looking thing. They in 1966 they released My Little Red Book as their first single. It's actually not written by Arthur. It's written by Burt Bacharach. And story goes is Burt Bacharach hated their version of it or something like that, but I don't know why. It's great. It was a different kind of song the way he wrote it.
Oh, so he wrote a different song then.
Well, it's the same song, but Arthur rearranged it. Okay, and he gave him credit, of course, but it just Bacharach didn't like the sound of it, or whatever. I don't know. The first album was a self-titled album, just Love, and it came out in March of '66. It sold moderately well, getting to number 57 on Billboard. Some of the other outstanding tracks on there is Sign DC, which is a song about heroin abuse. And No Matter What, which is kind of like a love song. It's a great record. Okay. My Little Red Book, Can't Explain. I think that's the first song on the album. Fantastic record. It should be in everybody's collection. After this, they would come out with a single, 7 and 7 Is, which is probably their most well-known song. Okay. 7 and 7 Is just, it's way ahead of its time. Snoopy's drumming, okay, is like sounds like he's a Ramone the way he's drumming. Okay, and in fact, the Ramones covered that song many years later. But 7 and 7 is a kind of song that you'd call proto-punk. Okay,
proto-punk, yeah,
anything like the Stooges were doing and the MC5 and real high energy. They wouldn't stay in that direction. That's probably the only song they have that's like that. But they did get. They would balance between their sound would balance between stuff like 7 and 7 Is, and then a Baroque kind of very 60s. They would have flutes in their songs and stuff like that. Okay. And very interesting because he walked this line between a couple of different genres and did it very well.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Now, that song 7 and 7 Is, it's not, the drumming's fantastic, but so's Johnny Eccles' guitar. All right, it's a sound.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you never heard a sound like this that he got. It's a very unique song, and it was Love's biggest hit, actually getting to number 33. Two more members were added at this time. You had a guy named T.J. Cantelli who played woodwinds. Okay, like I said, they were adding flutes and clarinets and stuff.
Yeah, you don't hear that much stuff like that a lot.
In the 60s you did, but yeah.
So I mean, later on, when he evolved, you never really heard like flutes and stuff.
No.
So anytime a band added that, it was like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah. So he added woodwinds, and then a guy named Michael Stewart came in on drums, and Snoopy Pfisterer moved to harpsichord. For some reason, Snoopy was a good drummer, but he didn't think he was a good drummer. So he moved over to that. Elektra's art director designed the distinctive logo for Love, which was kind of like a fancy script. And then the O had to manage to incorporate like the female and male symbols.
Yeah.
You know, kind of reminiscent of what Prince had, you know, like that symbol thing, you know. The second Love album was called Da Capo, and that came out in November of '66. 7 and 7 Is ended up being on that, as well as the next singles, which are called She Comes in Colors, and a song called Que Vida. Que Vida.
Que Vida.
Yeah, it was a much more experimental record, okay, much more than the first one, and it kind of showed the direction that Arthur wanted to go. The lineup would change a little bit after the release. Pfisterer and Cantrelli would leave Love, okay, and that would make them a 5-piece again.
Yep.
Okay, so Pfisterer was out after that record was released. They began work on their third album, which was the iconic Forever Changes. And it was produced by Bruce Botnick and released in November of 1967. The album displayed a more mellow and like avant-garde kind of sound to the band, but they were making what's considered their masterpiece. You have that happening, but at the same time, there was a lot of tension.
What do you mean by avant-garde? What do you mean by that?
Artsy. Okay, it was a little bit more like I mean, they have songs on there like with weird sounds in the back, people talking. You know, it's like a lot of. It's a great record. It's a little strange.
Weird.
Now I don't know. Like he was doing everything within a rock and roll format, but it was just I mean, there's really nothing like it. If you never heard it.
Was it like a Lou Reed album with just him making noises? Remember?
No, it wasn't like Feedback or anything like that.
Feedback.
No. It's a very mellow album.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to explain. You have to just listen to it. It's not long. You know, it's like a 35-40 minute album. You know, I think. Yeah, it's a good record. But problems were coming in the band because Brian McLean wanted more of his songs used. Okay, and that was supposed to happen. In fact, story goes is that Forever Changes was supposed to be a double album.
Wow.
Okay, and the way it was going to be was Johnny Eccles was going to write one side. Okay, another member, I think McLean was going to write the other side of a record, and then Arthur Lee would have one whole record for himself of his song. But when they got into the studio, Elektra let them know, you can't do a double album. We don't have the money for it.
Wow. So they did a single album.
So they ended up getting a single album out of it. You know, and they'd use the other songs later on. But it took away from the idea of Arthur Lee not, you know, using other people's music as well. Okay, and McLean supposedly really was pissed off about this and, you know, made a big beef in the band about it. The band ended up recording for 64 hours to make this record. Okay, so it was made pretty quick, you know. But what happened is some of the they brought in session musicians, the Wrecking Crew, okay, the guys that did all the Phil Spector stuff and everything.
Yeah.
And they were great, but what was happening is they were replacing the band, in a lot of sequences in the songs. So they don't, they play on the record. They absolutely play on the record, but there's just so much more, that they didn't play on. So, but it's, regardless, it's still a fantastic album.
But when let me ask you, when you're a band like that, right? You record all that stuff, and let's say you weren't planning a second album, but at least, let's say like a double album, at least you got music that you can just throw in other albums, and you pretty much got an album made. You don't even have to record it again because it's already recorded. You just got to put it in the album.
Yeah, I mean, if you were gonna use all that studio time, I mean, they did this in 64 hours, which is not that long. Okay, it's like not even 3 days of recording. All right,
also crazy.
I mean, I don't think they didn't do it straight. I'm sure they had breaks.
Yeah,
but it's still like very quick compared to what other bands were doing.
Oh yeah.
But they also were paying session musicians, so I'm sure that had something to do with working fast as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you have, many bands, if they have studio time left over, they'll record other stuff just to have it, and it might be a demo. Or it might be something that they will use later on another record, Yep. You got to take advantage of all that time that you paid for. You don't just let it go,
No, you don't let it go, because that time is studio time. It's like that's where the fucking budget goes most of the time.
Exactly, and that's how you waste money. But the one single off the album was a song called "Alone Again," which made it to number 123 in the pop charts. But in England, Forever Changes, the album, got to number 24, okay, as opposed to 154 in the United States. So it did very well overseas. And bands like guys like Dave Vanian and Captain Sensible in The Damned were listening when they were teenagers, okay, and influenced by this. Alone Again is on one of Molly's collections that you play at iBar. You hear it all the time. You just might not know the name of it. After Forever Changes, though, Brian McLean would leave the band, and he would reemerge in the 70s as like a contemporary Christian singer. That's what he got into. They did manage to record one last single with him, a song called Your Mind and Me Belong Together, but it didn't chart.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he went on and became a Christian singer. In the summer of 68, Love would break up, all right, due to mostly money and drug issues, okay? But, Eccles got into heroin, unfortunately, okay? He would survive it. He's still alive. But and the money problems, they just didn't sell enough there to really hold on, And in 69, though, the next year, it wouldn't take too long. Lee would reform the band with different people.
Okay.
Right. It was him on vocals and guitar, a guy named Jay Donnellan on guitar, a guy named Frank Fayad on bass, and George Saranovich on drums. Lee signed a record deal with Bob Krasno's Blue Thumb label, okay, which was a new label at the time. But when he signed with them, he didn't tell Krasno that he was still under contract with Elektra.
Ooh.
Okay, so Lee had been trying to get out of that Elektra contract since he signed it. He didn't like the contract. Okay, and Jack Holzman, who was the founder, CEO of Elektra, he tried to be reasonable. He didn't want to let Arthur Lee go, but he also didn't want to have an artist that didn't want to be on his label. Okay, so they came up with an idea. Because they had recorded all these songs for Blue Thumb, Holtzman would take the songs that he liked the best, 10 songs, and that would be the next Love album, okay, on that label, and that album would become the one called For Sale, all right,
Yep.
and it's For Sale like FOURSAIL, like a boat.
Yeah,
Okay.
like both.
Yeah. So then 3 months after that, okay,
Out here.
Out Here would come out on Blue Thumb, and that was the remaining songs.
So they gave those other songs to Electra then? That For Sale?
Holtzman listened to what they had recorded for Blue Thumb, and took took what he thought was the 10 best songs, and that was the For Sale album. And then what was left, they had recorded a lot of songs. There was another album worth of stuff there, and that ended up being the Out Here record. And to be honest with you, they're both good records. Okay, I was actually listening to Out Here. I think I had never heard that record entirely, maybe a song, and I was like, wow. I mean, for songs that were kind of like rejected by Elektra, they're still damn good.
Yeah,
You know?
and these are songs, and these are like they all there at the same time. So these are songs that came right after another. So this album came out, and then this other album came
Right.
out. With,
They came out just a couple of months apart.
Okay.
Now, during the initial Blue Thumb sessions, Krasno had approached Lee and asked if he would reform the original Love lineup at some point, because he felt that something was missing in their sound, which was now more like a harder edged sound. Okay.
Yeah.
They weren't doing any mellow stuff with strings and things like that. Lee said, okay, he obliged him, and he started rehearsing and doing some recording with the original members, Eccles, Forsey, and Stewart. Now, McLean turned him down. McLean said no. Okay, he didn't want any part of it. So Heroin, though, got back into being a focus of a problem here, because Eccles and Forsey were doing it, and what was happening was they would rent equipment, amps and stuff, and these guys would sell it for drug money. It's not even their own shit. Okay, they sell it other people. Okay, I mean, you gotta be lumped up when you're doing that.
I know whose lamp is that? Fuck it, sell it.
Fuck it, sell it. We paid rent on it. It must be ours.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, in Europe, they were always big, so they would tour Europe, and they would, Eccles and Forsey would be thrown out. They would be replaced. They were featured on Dutch TV in 1970 on that tour, and Out Here would hit number 29 in the UK.
They loved them in the UK.
Yeah, doing very well. The next album by Love was called False Start.
Why do you think that they're so good there, not here?
I think I think Europe, and particularly England, is a lot more open-minded to new sounds. Okay,
Yeah,
it's always been that way.
Okay, because they had a very unique sound. I don't think too many Americans appreciate, but I can see in Europe how it would work. The sounds, the recording, just the way I can see that working there. But here, we have a lot of people that they were one of these. They don't even get it.
They were one of these bands that you couldn't really pinpoint them with a sound. A lot of the songs sound different, but then they have songs that sound similar too. So it's very hard to pinpoint them into a genre. And Americans, we love to label things. This, that. So it's like I don't know. They just didn't click with the American audience as much as England. Maybe because it's a smaller country. England's what, like the size of New Jersey? You know what I mean? It's not that big. A little bit bigger. Not that big though.
Yeah.
But they continued with the False Start record in 1970, and it was still like a hard edge sound that they were doing, but they threw in some elements of R&B and soul music in there as well. New member Noonie Rickett was on guitar and vocals. And the opening track was a song called The Everlasting First, and it featured Jimi Hendrix on guitar.
That's pretty cool.
one of the last things that Hendrix had done. Now, according to legend, Arthur Lee overheard Bob Krasno from Blue Thumb say to someone that if False Start doesn't go top 10, he would release them from their contract.
Wow.
So Lee heard him, and legend goes he confronted him, and he made him put it down on paper and sign it. Okay? And guess what? The album didn't even break the top 200.
Wow.
So he got out of his record contract very easily with that. A lot of problems with labels, Arthur Lee, over the years. In 71, Love signed to Columbia Records, but recorded nothing releasable. Okay, so these would be released much, much later in 2009 on Sunday Records, and it was called Love Lost. But the Columbia didn't work out either. Now, in July of 72, he dissolved Love. At that point, he was called Arthur Lee and Love.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was, until it's July of 72, he released his first solo record just under Arthur Lee. It was this album called Vindicator, and he was on A&M Records at that point. Columbia had dropped them. And it featured a whole new group of musicians on this. The album didn't chart, but his next, the 1973 album called Black Beauty, was recorded for Buffalo Records. So he's bouncing from label to label now. In fact, that label actually folded Buffalo Records before the album could even be put out. All right.
Wow.
Yeah, but in 74, Lee did the title track to a blaxploitation movie called Thomasine and Bushrod. Okay, so yeah. A new album called Reel to Reel, new solo album, Reel to Reel, came out in 74, but didn't get noticed too much. Okay. Through the rest of the 70s and into the 80s, Arthur Lee had very little musical activity. He was getting a little sick of the business. I think there was some, drug problems also. His stepfather got very sick of cancer, and he went home to kind of take care of him. So he would reemerge in 1992. Okay, so he was really out of the scene for 15 to 20 years. Okay, and he came out with a new album called Arthur Lee and Love, Fire String Serenade. So he's back to using the Love name again. The French label called New Rose, which is a very cool label, they put it out. And the title track, Five String Serenade, would later be recorded by Mazzy Star, and also Jack White of the White Stripes would do a version of it.
Wow.
Okay. The album featured a new artist he discovered in San Francisco. His name was Keith Farish, also known as Demian X Diamond. Okay, and this guy would sing. Okay, and Lee would take the band to Paris, London, and Liverpool, England. In 1993, he played shows in New York and in England. And in 1994, a new single called Girl on Fire was released on Distortion Records. In 95, Rhino Records put out the box set Love Story, which was a two CD set. I have this. It's fantastic. It has a nice book that comes with it with a lot of line notes, a lot of information. And it covered that period from the beginning, 1966 to 1972. It sold very well, and the people were getting very interested in the band because they hadn't been seen in a long time, and there was a big push to put them back together, the original lineup with Johnny Eccles. Okay. However, in late 96, Arthur Lee was sentenced to 12 years in jail, okay, for the negligent discharge of a firearm. All right. Now, California has a 3-strike and you're out rule. Yeah. Not sure if they still do, but in the 90s they did. And Lee had been in trouble over the years. He had a couple of minor drug arrests, drunk driving arrests, I think he had an assault charge against him from one of his wives, something. Okay. So this is like the third strike. Okay. Now he said he didn't fire the gun. Okay. But
wow.
Yeah. Now he had actually done also 2 years prior to that. He did 2 years in prison when he was out of the scene for arson. Okay. Yeah. So he had some problems, but Lee denied that he fired the gun. Now there was a fan that day that visited him, a guy named Doug Thomas, and when he was questioned on the scene, when the cops questioned what was going on, they heard a gun go off. Yeah. Thomas said he had nothing to do with it. Okay. And Arthur got jammed up with it. Okay. But later, because Arthur was appealing this. Okay. And later, Doug Thomas would confess that he did it. Okay.
Yeah.
But what happened is in the original trial, Lee pled guilty. Okay. Or actually, no, he didn't plead. He was pleaded not guilty. Okay. Had he pled guilty, he would have gotten less time.
Wow.
Okay. He would have gotten only about 9 months, but he had gotten some bad advice legally. The case was a bit of a bullshit case.
Yeah,
and
it was a shit show.
Yeah, it was. And he ended up serving 5.5 years in jail and was released on December 12th, 2001, after an appeals court found that the prosecutor at the trial was guilty of misconduct. So there was problems with the prosecution as well, probably in evidence or something. Who knows? Okay. After releasing from prison, he put together a new band. So he lost his chance to reform Love right when the box set was selling well. Okay, he could have been a lot bigger. He put together a new band though once he got out of jail, and he planned to tour the 35th anniversary of Forever Changes. They were going to do the album in its entirety at live shows.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Now, 2 Love tracks, one called My Little Red Book from the first album and Always See Your Face, were included on the soundtrack for the John Cusack movie High Fidelity. Remember that movie?
Yep, that's a great movie.
Yeah, it is. In 2002, Arthur Lee began touring heavily in Europe, North America, and Australia. There's a live CD from that time called Arthur Lee in Love Performing Forever Changes. Okay, it's a live record, and it came out in 2003. Now, Johnny Eccles joined the band for a few shows in California at the time. While on tour, though, in 2005, Arthur Lee left the band and said he couldn't continue, but he gave no reason, no explanation. Okay. The band, with Eccles along, decided to continue without Arthur, and they were just called the Love Band, and they added some additional musicians to it. But in April of 2006, it was announced that Arthur Lee was being treated for leukemia.
Wow.
All right. And they immediately, the guy really didn't have a lot of money. There was a tribute fund was set up to pay for his bills, and there was a series of concerts that were scheduled at the Beacon Theater in New York City on June 23rd, 2006.
Yeah.
A show featuring Robert Plant, Ian Hunter, Ryan Adams, Niles Lofgren, and others raised money for the cause, okay, for his bills. Okay, and after several months of treatment, including chemotherapy, and he also did experimental stem cell transplants, he would die. He unfortunately passed away from complications of leukemia. He died at the age of 61 in the town he was born in, Memphis.
Wow.
That's the Love story.
Wow, that's a lot of detail, but he had a pretty good career. You think if he would have made it, if he didn't get sick, he probably would have still been rocking.
I think he'd still be out there. He'd be 76, 77 now. Okay, but Yeah, why not? You know. Also, I got to mention he was from a mixed background. His mother was black and had a lot of American Indian in her, Cherokee, I think. I think. And his father was black as well. So he was a very interesting looking guy. Okay, he was biracial in that sense. Not too many bands at that time featured, people of color, okay, playing rock and roll, so they were very unique in that aspect.
But the band Love is still playing now. Didn't they just announce UK 2022 tour?
I'm not aware of them. Would it be Johnny Eccles doing it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's Johnny Echo. So this is the following.
Where are you reading this from?
The group completed a farewell tour of the UK in 2019, but could continue to perform in the US. Love Revisit in November 2021.
Love Revisited. Yeah, it's probably one original guy or something.
Yeah, it's Johnny Echo featuring the Love Band, featuring Johnny Echo. They announced that they will again tour in the UK in 2022, and some show will play the whole of the first two albums.
Da Capo also. Wow.
Love and Da Capo. And in the entirety as well as Forever Changes.
Wow. That's a long show.
That's a long show. I got to be at least like 90 minutes, maybe longer.
No, that's got to be about 2.5 hours, I think.
So pretty much, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is. I wasn't aware of that. Well, I've never seen. I had one or two opportunities over the years to see Arthur Lee, and I didn't go.
Yeah,
I kind of regret that. But I wouldn't mind seeing Johnny Eccles. Very good guitar player. Very kind of underrated. You don't hear much about him in the lexicon of great guitar players, but he's a good one.
Yeah, he's a good one. Yeah, so he's playing. He's part of the group. I think he's actually the only member. So
yeah, I think he's the only original. I'll keep an eye on that. See when that's happening. If it's coming to New York City, we can go.
They might play. If they play, they'll probably play like the Beacon or something.
Something like that. Irving Plaza, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, Irving Plaza. Yeah, or even the Gramercy.
Yeah, that's another. A lot of shows at the Gramercy.
Oh, they can even play Webster Hall.
Maybe, yeah.
It'll
be cool.
It's small enough. Like Webster Hall, they can probably get like 2,000 people in there.
I think they could sell 2,000. Yeah.
Yeah, because Gramercy is like 600, I think.
Yeah, it's a little smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, Mike, thank you for all the information. Another great band. And the next show I think we're doing is about Fishbone.
Yeah. We're going to do a show on Fishbone next week. And they're an interesting band. They got a long history. And it's one of these bands with a lot of lineup changes. Oh, you don't like them?
Fishbone.
I don't like everything, but I like most of it. The first couple everything they did in the 80s and the early 90s I like. But they've been putting out some interesting records of late, like in the last 15 years. They've been around a long time. Okay.
Yeah.
Another band with a million lineup changes, though.
Yeah. It's always amazing when you get bands like that.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. So how can we get in touch with you?
Okay, you can find me on Instagram, RockerMike212. You can find me on Facebook under RockerMike, and of course the Rock Show podcast group page. And I'm under RockerMike on CloutHub and MeWe. How about you? MeWe doesn't get a lot of action.
Nah. You can find me on any social media platform at Getting Loved Up, and if you look it up, I got the website. I got the links to all the podcasts, and also the YouTube channel, the Instagram, and the Facebook. And right now we're doing a current series that's getting a lot of appeal. It's getting a lot of views. We're doing the Son of Sam Chronicle, and it's getting a lot of hits and views. And we'd like to welcome you to, if you like the Rock Show, check that out. It's a 7-episode series. It's up on on YouTube right now, and actually the whole thing should already be out by now, right? Right, Mike?
I would think, yeah. So if you came over from those shows, welcome. It's great to have you on board. The Rock Show was the first show that me and Rob did, now over 3 years ago. So
yeah,
we've had 153 episodes. And I want to give a shout out to the country of Kenya. Kenya, we have gone top 30.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's great.
I bet it's that 1% of people that got vaccinated.
Well, whoever you are, if you're enjoying the show in Kenya, thank you. We appreciate it for putting us over the top over there. Yeah. So what do we always say at the end of every show, Rob?
Don't get drunk.
We get lumped up.
We get lumped up. See you next week, people.
Take care.
Podcast you will hear that will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. Don't tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on The Rock Show.